George and Simone, please come on up and take the stage, and Adriana will be joining us virtually as well. Fellas, come on up. So while we wait for Adriana to get connected, I was thinking, oh, she's here. Hello, welcome. I have to say, gentlemen, this is the first panel where no one's wearing a tie, so thank you. I decided I was going to be bold and not wear one, and I find out we're all doing the same. Adriana, thank you for joining us. And I know that we have some tight schedules to maintain. So Simone, I'm going to let you start first. So, there's so many things we could be talking about right here, but I want to give from each of you a sense for how do you describe the state of transportation across the region? Within your portfolio, within what you look at, tell us what the transport landscape looks like now.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. And thank you for letting me speak on something that we really love a lot.
Good.
Transportation obviously suffering from pandemic. That's definitely. And with transportation suffering because obviously people living in their houses, using their own cars. So a transportation, a public transportation in particular, which relies on tariffs and relies on payments of the passengers, definitely is stuck in a difficult position, which obviously affect also some of the projects that have been built throughout some years in the region. Nevertheless, there are cities that are already on track on it, and they kept being on it. And nowadays, despite the pandemic situation which we passed, we see cities like Bogota, for instance, or Santiago keeping on pushing on the change of transportation towards the introduction of electric solutions. So up to now, we can count on 1,100 buses, electric, working in Bogota, almost 800 in Santiago, 1,000 more coming by the end of the year in Santiago. So despite, it's a sort of dichotomic situation. Despite the pandemic, we see a long-term way that is producing interesting solutions, and hopefully they are as a good example for other cities as well.
And for the audience, what role does Enel play in this, in the infrastructure that supports this? Tell me what role you play.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other interesting part. The natural role of Enel, being a public utility, is providing energy, and we are all happy about the introduction of electric buses because it means more consumption of electricity by definition. Nevertheless, since we already developed services as an added value to energy, and definitely now service as a proper business line on their own, we are also covering a different role. We, with the first projects, and nowadays through our financing partnership, we provide what we call e-bus as a service solution, meaning a 360-degree solution, which starts from financing the buses, putting all the infrastructure, also financing in case the infrastructures, selling energy, obviously, which, as a matter of fact, being Enel Group, one of the major private renewable generator in the world, most of this energy is renewable by definition, and definitely, which is least but not less important, the platform, the digital platform, because the funny thing with electric mobility is that you can upgrade the savings by properly using in a digital way your charging station, and so software and platform, they became of paramount importance as well.
Very good. My reminder to the audience, questions, please. We've been getting loads of them for all of the other sessions, so I'll be very disappointed if we don't have any for this one. But Adriana, welcome. I'd love to hear from you. So tell me your perspective. What's the state of transportation, in the region? We're emerging from pandemic. We have lots of technology and policy choices ahead of us. Tell us how it looks from your perspective.
Well, first, we are from the World Resources Institute, and we are working on an agenda that's for climate, people, and nature. So it's working for the health of ecosystems and people together. So when we work in transport specifically, I would give my point of view on three things. First, we are very high emitting. In Latin America, transport is always among first to third highest emitter in our countries. And we are also estimating that the growth is 114% to 2050 if we don't do anything. So it's very important for climate that we get transportation right. And Latin America is growing actually 1.5 times faster than the global average. So we are growing our emissions very fast. And after the pandemics, after everybody has been home and we expected a positive change, what we see now is a very big desire and a very rapid growth for private cars. And we'll talk a little bit more on this. So, high emitters. Second, there is a very big problem of exclusion in the transport systems. We made some studies for Mexico City in this case, that there is 17 times more access for higher levels of income in the population than lower levels to employment in a 30-minute area around their houses. So we can see 17% more access from rich people than poor people in Mexico City, but 70 more access if you are talking about, for example, a university. And finally, a very big issue of exclusion towards the women. The economy of health is now really being taken into account. And we see that during the pandemics, we can really test that women got more excluded because they have to take care of others, of their children, of their parents. So every time you have to do, women are even in worse conditions. And finally, if we want to work with low fatalities, we still have only in Mexico more than 13,000 people dead every year in the mobility system. So the vision for the future would be zero emissions, zero exclusion, zero fatalities. And that's kind of the driver of the organization. And not in such a good way, just as Simone said, with a very good crisis, a very important crisis of public transport at the moment, being that from 570 million inhabitants in Latin America, 200 million depend on public transport every day. So this is very important in terms of access. So very significant financial crisis in public transport, very important growth in motorization, unfortunately. So a very big need and high accidentality. So very big need for very strong changes in the mobility sector in the next few years.
Thank you very much, Adriana. So I'm actually going to ask for a quick show of hands if there's anybody in here, in this room, who does not use George's company service. Do I have any? No, I see literally none. Do you see any? Yeah, none. Okay. So I don't think we need to say what Uber is, but I'm just going to let you then go ahead. Tell us, from where you sit and what you operate, the state of play right now as we come out of pandemic in the region.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I'd say, if I could choose one word, we would say it's unsustainable. The situation of transportation in Latin America and globally as well. We just cannot continue in this path. We really are strong believers in the need to move towards a green future. And we think that cities and companies like Uber need to move faster to help us all get there. And we thought about it, we debated internally sort of what role we could play, and we felt like accountability was really important, we felt like transparency was really important, and ambition as well. So we set a goal that we think is very ambitious, which is that by 2040, all of our trips on the platform globally will be zero emission. And that'll be a combination of the vehicles that people use to move around in Uber today, the integrations that we have with public transportation in a bunch of cities, and also micro-mobility. 0% by 2040. And in many cities, that'll actually be 2025. or even 2030, so even earlier than that. Latin America is a little bit further behind the curve because of the lack of infrastructure, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but that's really a big piece of what we wanted to do, and we see ourselves playing a core role in helping the world move towards that more sustainable future. Because ultimately we think that accountability is what will create the sense of urgency that I think has been lacking in some places.
And in fact, that was the question that came in as I was asking you my question was, how can taxis and ride-hailing be part of a sustainable future given the contribution to congestion and pollution more than public transport? Well, I think honestly the pollution part, I do actually believe is answerable, in a time frame. But how do you think about congestion? And Adriana, I would ask you as well that. How do you think about congestion as something to be solved in the coming years and decades?
Yeah, so actually, the greatest contributor is the personal vehicle. And what we want to do with our platform is replace the need for people to own a personal vehicle. Most personal vehicles sit unutilized 95% of the time. And even when they are being used, they're used at peak hours, usually one person per vehicle. Yesterday, I went from one point of the city to another point. It took me 30 minutes to go 2.5 kilometers after waiting 15 minutes for the pickup because the traffic is just so intense. And every car that I saw, other than the one that we were in, which I was sharing with 2 other people, basically every other car had one person. Yeah. And so that we see as a really core problem. And so what we need to do is be able to offer a multitude of options, including integration with public transportation. And we have that in several cities in the region, like Sao Paulo, like Mexico City, where you can actually plan a trip with public transportation in the Uber application and compare the price of it, which is often lower, to another Uber service, similar to what you could do with the Google Maps. And we also have several agreements in cities where you can actually buy tickets for public transportation in the application. And so we see ourselves very much as a technology platform that enables public transport, private transport, but ultimately looks to remove the need to buy and use a personal vehicle, which is the vast majority of the car park in Latin America and globally. And so we think if we're able to do that, we will fundamentally change both an emissions thing as we shift to green by 2040, but also congestion ultimately as people share more vehicles and by doing so lower the price.
Good. So, I have my own questions, but actually the audience questions are beating me to them every time, which is great. So I'm actually going to direct this one. I'm going to start over and direct this question to Adriana and Simone both, which is, how do you see the electric transportation trend in Latin America, and what should be the trigger on this process? Government, policies, public transportation itself, or the private sector? Adriana, do you want to start with that?
Yes, well, I think there is a two-pronged answer to that.
Okay.
It's when we are trying to solve transportation, as you said, I think public policy plays a super important role. I think when the countries have a very big push and really give incentives to be able to push for a new technology, of course it occurs much faster. But if you really want to do good for transport, for congestion and for the environment, we really need to be careful to promote and push public transport a lot, or solutions that are more integrated. We do see solutions that are public transport plus last mile solutions combined in much more specific ways and with technology involved in the future. Maybe Uber, a lot of others, last mile solutions. So we do see solutions that are one side very public policy related, especially to try to get the cars to be such a less important actor in the whole field. And we think this will be and should be more on the private sector beyond, pushing for new technology to be faster and to go for more people. But then to make the whole of mobility for public transport, we absolutely need to have a very big push for electrification. I think Bogota started, Mexico has already started with the smaller experiences, but I am quite sure that this is going to evolve as a much bigger market in the next few years.
Very good. Simone?
Well, rather than pointing at some of those actors that you mentioned, I would rather point at one single big ecosystem. What we really need is that all those actors, they put together their efforts and they work together to build ecosystems that allow electric mobility to be proven, which so far I would say is already,
yes,
but have the proper space to increase as we all believe. So how to build an ecosystem is the question. and we all are invited in participating in it. Public-private partnership is one of the key solutions, and actually was the way we first set the former projects. In Santiago, the first projects, they came as an idea from the private sector that found the proper attitude from the public one, and together they built the first 100 projects, and then 200, and definitely we are landing at 1,000 buses coming from a public tender. So ecosystems is the key. I would also say that when we talk about private sector, we can talk about public utility like we are, but we're also talking about financing sector, which is really invited in bringing their own space there. At the beginning, we as a public utility, we have been forced to finance buses, for instance, which is not our job, actually, right. And we cannot do better than a bank or a financial institution. So they have to participate. Technologies provider, for instance, electric vehicle producer, manufacturers, they have to sit there and contribute, because they have to defeat the technological myths as well. We still remain, I know, and everybody that is already working in the massification of electric mobility knows that technology is not a barrier. But nevertheless, as also Adriana said, we have to spread out the word and convince outside that there is no technological myth. So we need also manufacturers to work on it.
Very good. I've got an interesting one here, which is that it begins with a statement rather than a question. But the statement is, policies are usually lagging. So how can we make progress in building sustainable infrastructure fast enough while navigating that reality? I actually quite like this question, because we tend to think of them as if policy, then that. But George, I'll ask you first, like in the absence of policy, how do you move quickly, but then obviously be ready when policy emerges?
Yeah, and you're right. The technology goes well in advance of the regulation. That's often what happens. And innovation in general, I would say the same applies. I'll steal a word from Simone, which is ecosystem.
Yes.
And something we like to say at Uber is that climate is a team sport. This isn't just one player that's going to do this. It's public sector and private sector working together. And often that innovation is coming from the private sector, but there's many things we can do, and there are partnerships that can happen among players in this ecosystem. And actually, Enel and Uber have a partnership, it turns out, that we're currently operating in Chile, through which there's an investment happening both in building out charging infrastructure, which is a huge piece of the missing puzzle, particularly in Latin America, as well as bringing and deploying and managing fleets of electric vehicles, and then renting those vehicles at attractive prices to drivers on platforms like ours. And so that's an example of a program that we've launched in advance of there being a specific regulation, for example, around our industry. And the reason we're doing that, again, is because we're accountable to a goal that we set by 2040. We can't wait for regulation to sort of push us in that direction. We want to be setting the trend and pushing the ecosystem forward. And so there's various ways that we can still achieve things. And another example is at Uber, we're thinking of ways that we can push forward both on the supply side but also the demand side. And we have a product called Uber Green, and in Latin America a product called Uber Planet, where we're actually giving consumers an opportunity to choose to move in a green vehicle. So where their EVs exist, so that's Uber Green, and it's the same price typically as a comparable gas-powered vehicle, and we've seen tremendous demand for that product. People want these services, but they're also not that aware of them, and so we have this huge platform with over 100 million users every month. Well, this is a way to get the message out about the importance of sustainability. And within Latin America, Uber Planet is a way to offset the carbon of your trips, because we don't actually have that many EVs actually in our ecosystem in Latin America. And so people are choosing that frequently. It's a slightly higher price, and we're using that slightly higher price to help fund incentives for the purchase of electric vehicles from our drivers. And that's been a very successful product with over 47,000 tons of carbon dioxide offset to date.
So I'm curious, this is Santiago, you said, were you
with Enel, yeah.
Did you initiate that? Did George initiate that?
We both.
How did it start? How did it start?
It started with cooperation, and if you sit around the table, who had the first idea? I mean, it's an idea of both of us. When we we have a strong presence in Santiago. We actually start, and I may say we actually start all that is now Santiago in terms of electric mobility. And definitely we understood that instead of fighting against the walls, trying to make it massively, because we are still missing good prices to invest in private cars, we realized that public transport on one side and shared transports, let's say, on the other side, or fleet transport, they were the answers. So that's why, together with Uber, we definitely put in place a really interesting and replicable solution there in Santiago. So I really hope that this will also be replicated in other countries, and we are already working on it.
Good. I've got an interesting one for us here, which is, who wins out of this sustainability infrastructure growth trend in Latin America? Is it the United States? Is it China? Is it Europe? Adriana, any particular idea? And then we'll take it back down here to the floor.
Who wins? I think the wins is always a question on what defines who is winning, right? And that's why we are so clear that for us, a winning combination is zero emissions, zero exclusion, zero fatalities, because this can really get you to a goal that's very clear. That's where we want to get. So winning should be defined under certain parameters. So for me, at the moment, in the race for sustainability, it seems like Europe is going more into the right direction on having very strong policies to try to take cars out of their downtowns, with so many cities that are designed already for bikes, in Amsterdam or Copenhagen. I know those are very developed cities, but if you see, there is a very big push in many of the cities with very common policies and very common trends in terms of no downtowns with very high parking, and then very good public transport, very significant investment in public transport, clean public transport, which of course the solutions of the private sector, just like the ones that Uber and Enel are giving, are really important. In Latin America, we have to be more creative. And I think this is a good thing. It's not all public. The combination of public-private will definitely have a lot more impact in our cities. But I would say that for the moment, in terms of sustainability, I would say that Europe comes first. Then I would think Latin America, and I think it's taken a lot more time for the US to figure out that their mobility system needs a deep and structural change.
Good. Now to the floor. George, what do you say?
In terms of who wins?
Yeah.
I would say our children, and especially our grandchildren.
Ooh, good answer. Okay.
Because I have 3 children, small children. I would like for them to grow up, and their kids in particular, to grow up in a world where they can actually breathe the clean air and have a way to move around. And honestly, if we don't create the sense of urgency, I'm not convinced that they will actually be able to even live on this planet. Yeah. I mean, that's the level of urgency we have to create. This is a serious, serious problem, and we're in a good position. I think we have the right tools working together to make this a livable place for our children and our grandchildren. But that's who I would say ultimately wins if we get this right.
Okay. Simone?
Difficult now.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that answer because I also have 3 children. So, so definitely we are all working for them, we might say. Who's leading the race right now? Apart from China, who's on another championship, I would say, for several reasons. And being a European, living and working in LATAM, I would say that definitely LATAM found its own space and its own race, which is not racing against Europe or neither United States in terms of private vehicle. I go back to this point. And this winning its own race on public transport. At the end of 2022, we will have 3,300 electric buses circulating in LATAM, mainly in 2 cities. This is the right point as well, but definitely we have thousands of electric buses. So is LATAM winning? Yes, it is. Can do more? Yes, definitely. We are missing a lot of entities working on it. I cannot say much about the United States, but I mean, again, we are all on track. Everybody on its own specific race, I would say.
Good. Okay. We've got about 4 minutes left, and I have a question, and apologies to those who were in my breakout session earlier. I already said I asked the same question to wrap up every kind of discussion like this. My question is this. It's the year 2032, just 10 years in the future. We're here at the New Economy Gateway again, and we're looking back on the 10 years that happened. And so I want us to reflect from the future and say, well, we're going to answer two things. First, what did we worry about too much? What were we obsessed with about in 2022 that turned out to not be a problem? And then the tougher one is, what did we not think about enough? What were the things that we're not doing a good job looking ahead? So Adriana, I'm going to ask you first. It's 2032. We're looking back. There was something that we thought about way too much, and there's something that we didn't consider enough. What do you think they are? Adriana, we can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Very sorry.
There we are. Good.
Yes. So first, I think we are worrying a little bit too much on the old consumption patterns, okay? Because young people are really trying to make their lives more local, more livable, more sustainable. So I think we are worrying too much. That's a very big impediment for our future, is like individual patterns of consumption that we see today. I think this, we are worrying too much because I think this naturally is moving to a new direction. And what I think we are worrying too little, I think we are worrying too little about creating more equal cities. I think we are not investing enough on giving more equal access to the number of people that are living in our cities. And a sustainable future, in my opinion, cannot really happen without a lot more equity in Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you. Simone.
So I go to the technological side, let's say.
Good, please.
I mean, probably right now we are worried a lot too much on technology and its mix, because we are doing innumerable pilots. Everybody's piloting something, while actually technology is already proven that is feasible, both from technological point of view and economic point of view. What we are still missing is standardization and platformization, common rules and common ground in terms of proper space for electric mobility, for instance, to grow properly. Putting in place electric mobility means planning, because electric mobility is not only given by electric vehicles, but also by the infrastructure. So far, for instance, just to give a number, the electric terminals that we built for the buses, they mean around 100 megawatt installed of new capacity. So we need to plan it.
Yes.
And we need rules and framework to do it.
Very good. Literally 1 minute left, George.
Yeah, that's sure. I'd say on what we think about too much, I'd say strategy. I think we're spending too much time thinking and not enough time doing, and continuing to worry about if we should do things. When I think it's incredibly clear, probably to all of us in this room, that we have to act yesterday, not today. A little more action, a little less conversation, right? And I think in terms of what we're probably not thinking about enough, I very much echo the comment on equity. I think today, most of the charging infrastructure that exists in affluent neighborhoods. The prices of the electric vehicles that are in the market today are incredibly expensive, and most people, particularly in Latin America, cannot afford them. So we can produce 10 billion of those vehicles. If the price remains where it is, it doesn't matter. We're not going to move the needle on changing the usage of gas-powered vehicles. We just have to obsess a lot more about the availability in all of the neighborhoods, not just for rich people. And so I think that's really what we have to change. And if I were to go ahead 10 years, maybe we aren't thinking enough about.
I really appreciate that as a place for us to end, because I do think on the 10-year timeline, equity is essential, the thing to be solved, as we would say. Thank you very much to my audience. Ladies and gentlemen on the panel, thank you very much for joining, and we are all done. Thank you.
Thank you.